Next task is to create a user and allocate them some privileges. So we'll start off by going down to privilege settings, and before we start creating a user, I might just create a group. So we'll start off by creating a user group. So this code is a code that will be used generically for this user group from this point onwards, and then we assign users to this user group, which we can do through this edit button here. But because we haven't got many users, I'll just start off by creating the user group first and then creating the users. So next we go down to up to the user area. We got one user created by the system called admin, so we'll create another user called, in this case, tech admin, because in standard installations we create that user and rotate the password very frequently. Just a temporary password. Obviously when you're putting in a user, optional email and password, email and phone number. But at this point here, we assign the user group that this particular user is going to belong to, and because it is an administrative user, we'll assign it to the administrators group as well as the general staff group. If there was something that we omitted and we need to change it, we can always edit the account or edit the security. So now that we've created our user, we can continue on to do one of the more typical things we might do, and that's create a shared folder. These are the shared folders that have been created by the system when it is installing applications and features. But we're going to create one of our own, and we're going to use this shared folder as one of the drives that PCs connected via the network connect to. So let's call it drive N. Drive N, capital, drive N, lowercase, doesn't matter really. Put in a comment, but this is a drive that we're going to be sharing amongst users on the network. Access privileges. Tech admin has full read-write control. Now this drive N exists. Oops, I've created the drive N on the wrong volume because, as you may remember, we opted to have the local network. So we'll just as volume 3. So we'll just remove that and do that again. This time we'll correctly set the LAN, which will put it in that third volume, and we'll allocate tech admin read-write permission again and create. So now we have our drive N. Interesting to note, you can't have drive N as a shared folder more than once. You can't have a drive N, the name drive N or any other name, duplicated across multiple volumes. There's can only be one instance of that name, so choose carefully when you're selecting the volume that you're going to create this in. But let's see what it's actually done by creating that volume. Inside the volume 3, the LAN volume, you can see drive N has been created, and if we were to create files and put them in there, that would be accessible to everybody in the network. In a similar way, if we were to use a Windows Explorer, Windows Explorer to navigate through the system, so it's NAS FA 8BD7. That strange computer name that's been created by the system when it was built. You can see that once we've selected that, drive N exists, and it's asking us to log in because we created a user ID. We can now log in, create a file if we wanted to. Put some stuff into it. Put something meaningful. Save, close. So from Windows we're able to access that file. If we were to use the Explorer, the equivalent of Windows Explorer for the NAS, we could see that same file exists. This is a test. There it is. Okay. So now we have this access from the local PC to a drive called drive N. It'd be good to be able to make that a normal drive letter available from that PC. So from the network on the PC, I'm able to map a network drive. But if I map the network drive to this strange obscure name that was created by the installation, was NASF28BD, too hard. So let's change that name to something more meaningful. Go to System Settings, General Settings. There it is there. Let's rename this entire NAS to QNAP10. That's its name from this point onwards, and when I push apply, it'll go through its rigmarole, and after a couple of minutes apply that change. Then I can use from any PC, any computer, Linux, Windows, anything, that unique name, and it is associated with this NAS device. Sorry, I said associated, not associated. It is the name of this device, which will point to a unique IP. So that now makes everything a whole lot easier. If I go back to my local Windows PC and put in the unique ID QNAP11, then comes the shared folders from QNAP11, the NAS. I can right mouse click on that particular drive. It then pops up and says, what drive letter would you like it to be? I'll choose N and connect it, sign in if I want to, and it should ask me for a login and password. Now, because I created the user tech admin for earlier on, I use that user ID and password, and voila, I then have access to that drive. And the original name, that long convoluted name, no longer exists. It's now QNAP10. It'll remain that way until forever. Another function of the control center is quota. Quota is normally used in a more domestic environment where you want to be able to set a quota on individual family or family members or anybody who's accessing the network. So by enabling this, you can then say, all right, I'm going to give 2 megabytes, 3 megabytes, 2 gigabytes, whatever, to each person, and once they exceed that, they can't add it anymore. In a commercial environment, that's not as useful, so we generally leave it off. Next, it's time to talk about the shared folder. These shared folders created on the NAS are placed into volumes. There's the volumes nominated on the left-hand side that this folder was created in. For those of you who are familiar with Windows or Linux or any other operating system, you'll know that there are commands. For example, if I was to come over to and start up my Windows File Explorer, you have a drive and you have folders. Let's say a temp folder here. Within that folder you can create other subfolders, so you can create your own little hierarchy. It is the same on a NAS. it has file station, and within any of these folders you can create subfolders and subfolders for any purpose. But what about protecting some of that information? What about saying, alright, I want certain parts of my organization to, or certain roles within my organization to have access to that folder, but not others, and or be able to give certain people read access, the ability to open and look at information, but not change it. Usually this type of security is put in place, or this type of access control is put into place to protect specific folders within a directory structure. It's possible with the NAS, as it is out of the box, to assign this type of security to a folder. So for example, if I pick this shared folder here, you'll see I can then nominate which users have access to that folder, whether they can read and write, or there is a mechanism obviously to deny them access altogether. Another way of handling this is to set up groups for roles within the organization, general staff, administrators, and a finance department perhaps, and then using this button on the right hand side here, you can look at the shared folders and allocate the same read and write access control to a folder for a group. And this is a more convenient way to manage things, because when you're adding users, you can allocate those users to groups, or allow them to join or be part of groups, and then your administration of the system access is made a lot easier, because you only need to change it against the group, and all the users that are subscribed or are a part of that group are automatically given that same access control. This kind of control, access control, works quite well in a home environment. It works well in a small business environment. But where you start to need something extra is in the case of a more complex directory structure, such as would be found in a business, where you might have a folder, and within that folder, for drive in for example, there are subfolders and subfolders, and trying to create a flat directory structure where all of those folders are exposed at the root file system level, and then each of them given access control, becomes a little cumbersome with a very large system with a lot of folder information. And also, if you think about it, ultimately the folder structure needs to be chosen in such a way that it helps the business function more efficiently. And a folder structure that is cumbersome and clunky and people have to be overly educated to use it doesn't allow for people to intuitively know where things should be stored when they create a document. So if we were to, for example, be looking at this sample folder structure, we can see that on this drive in, which has been mapped to all users, the admin folder underneath it is just used by administration staff and managers. So it might be used for the accounts department and all managers who need to access it. I imagine that within there'll be subfolders that might have limited access to only more senior managers, such as perhaps the business plan, cash flow statements, and so on. So that inside this folder there's additional layers of security which would be controlled by roles. The work folder may be available to everybody, but then folders within it might have additional limitations, such as if you have an R&D department that's conducting research and development that needs to be kept confidential until such time as it's freely available. It might be available just to those specific managers and the R&D staff themselves. For another example might be the delivery folder, the folder that is used and has a number of subfolders within it that's used by the installation, the project management office and the delivery crews. So there'd be a variety of documents and subfolders in there used for the managing of that part of the business. And then finally, a final example might be billing. Inside of the work/billing folder there might be quotes, statement of work, pro forma invoices, schedules, and so on. So all of these examples are using the same root, as it's called, folder or root access through a drive N, which is then mapped to N colon on the PC. But underneath that there is a variety of subfolders which match the way the business works. So in this case, having the security only able to be mapped against the parent folder drive N would mean that you would then need to expose all those subfolders in this shared folder setup, which would mean that people can't just go and create a folder and automatically have the security of the parent created. Somebody who's an administrative person would have to be responsible for coming into this part of the system and setting up folders all the time, which is much too cumbersome. To accommodate that, the NAS has a thing called advanced folder permissions. And if I enable that now and then press the accept, it will take quite a while to go through the entire system and rearrange everything. And so I've just got another NAS set up here already with the advanced folder permissions activated. And as you can see, if I pick a folder like this multimedia one here, I can also see the subfolders, whereas without advanced folder permissions, when I pick the folder, I could only pick the folder and assign permissions against its parent, and that was it. With advanced folder permissions, however, I can go right down to any of the levels and assign a particular group or user to those subfolders, which then allows me to set up a folder structure which matches the way the business works, but be able to control it in accordance with the roles that people play within the business. The Windows ACL support option underneath the advanced folder permissions adds an additional layer of capability to the NAS. The Windows ACL is a mechanism, is an access control mechanism by which folders and files on the NAS their permission and access can be altered using a PC from a Windows Explorer. These permissions include all the features that Windows usually supports, including the traverse. That's when you can take a file in an area that you can't read or you shouldn't be able to edit or change, and copy, paste, or try and move it into a folder that you can read in a way such as that you can then try and avoid the security. You know, it handles things like that. It handles execution rights. It handles read-write attributes, creating and modifying files within a folder that's got some restriction on it for your login, ability to create, edit, and delete subfolders within a folder that you may or may not have access to, the ownership and synchronization to other devices control. All of these things are adding additional layers of complexity to your system, as well at the same time as they're adding additional capability. So with these permissions enabled, you need to consider you will have these additional capabilities, but you may need the help of an additional skilled person within your organization to help you support that. Now, if you're looking at this video and you are interested in Windows ACL, I recommend you pause the video right now and just write down this link here. This Bigbox Training Attachment 1205 is a very good article explaining this in detail. If you need to use it or you think you might use it in the future, it's worthwhile bookmarking that link. The last thing to talk about in relation to advanced folder permissions, that's AFP, and Windows ACL, is the obvious questions we are often asked. Can I enable advanced folder permissions or ACL to test it and then remove it if I'm not going to use it? So, good question. The answer to that is pretty much not really. You can enable AFP and if you then decide not to use it, you can disable it again. If you disable it, the system should return to the way it was before. However, if you have in the period of time from the time you enabled it to the time you disabled it, gone in and made some very specific changes to the folder structure, like for example a subfolder of a subfolder made that denied to a certain user group. I haven't tested that myself or heard of anybody testing it. There's a chance that the changes that you made may still be there after the AFP is disabled. So the only way to handle that then might be to when you come across a folder after removing AFP that you can't access, you may just need to copy that folder into a new fresh folder somewhere adjacent to it, change the permissions to what you want, and then delete the folder that you can't get access to. So basically duplicate it, change the duplicate, and then remove the original, which should be safe enough, because when you copy it, you're copying it and its subfolders, making a complete image of it, so it should preserve everything. It's just a tactic to get around any peculiarities that may emerge after disabling AFP again. With ASCL, the same applies. If you have gone in and changed some of the subfolder permissions whilst ACL was enabled and then you've disabled it, it's obviously not possible to it is possible to remove it after you've installed it, but if you've gone in and made specific changes to subfolders, you may find that change is still intact after you've turned off ACL, and you may have to use some tactic along the lines of what I've just described to resurrect the file so that it can be used. If your question is in relation to how does it work, well, Windows ACL will work the same as it does on a Windows machine. You should find that whatever you can change on a local drive of a Windows PC will be exactly the same as what you would change on the NAS. To experiment with Windows ACL in isolation in a particular folder, there's nothing more that you need to do than to create a folder on a regular PC and go in there and make those changes and see what effect they have on access and control and synchronization. And that's all we have for this section on setting up the users and the access. The next step in setting up the system will be in the following video. We'll see you there.